Hello there, welcome to this exam walkthrough video for OCR GCSE History, Living Under Nazi Rule. Okay, so just a reminder that when you're doing any of these history exams, it's really important to think about your key second order concepts of cause and consequence, similarity and difference, significance and continuity and change, and try and get that great historical language into your work for your analysis. Okay, so for the Germany exam, you're going to be answering 3 questions, question 6, question 7, and then you've got a choice between question 8 or 9. So in a nutshell, question 6 is worth 7 marks. It's what can source A tell us about something, and you use the source and your own knowledge to support your answer. The question 7 is the usefulness question, so you'll be given a mix probably of sources and interpretations, probably 2 sources and 1 interpretation. And you'll have to think about how useful they are for a historian studying a specific inquiry. And in question 8, question 9 is your classic how far do you agree question. You need your 4 key arguments with a degree of balance and finish with a conclusion where you give the clinching argument. So let's have a look at how you do question 6. It's worth 7 marks. So the question is, what can source A tell us about wartime opposition in Nazi Germany? Use the source and your own knowledge to support your answer. Now what you're looking for this question is to make some inferences, and the key thing is to write about both provenance and content. So let's just read the source carefully. Source A is an extract from a report of a local branch of the Nazi Party to the Gestapo in 1943, and it says, I have been informed that gatherings of young people have become more common than ever, especially since the last bombing raid in Dusseldorf. These youngsters hang around into the late evening with musical instruments and young females. Since this lowlife is to a large extent outside the Hitler Youth and adopts a hostile attitude towards the organisation, they are a danger to other young people. There is a suspicion that it is these youths who've been writing slogans like "Down with brutality" on walls. So what you're looking for is to write about provenance. Now, provenance is who's written it, when and why, but really focusing on the purpose of the source and the audience in terms of what this tells you about wartime opposition. So why has the source been made? What's the audience? Who do they think is going to be listening to this? As you read the source, highlight short and snappy quotes that you'll be able to use linked to the question on wartime opposition in Nazi Germany. So that's really good practice, because when you actually answer the question, you're going to want to use some quotes. So here you can see I've now highlighted some short and snappy quotes. So I've highlighted the more common than ever. I've highlighted the use of the word low life. I've highlighted the use of the words danger to other young people and the down with Nazi brutality. So you want to be thinking about why the source has been made. So they're probably making a report as they're concerned about opposition, and that therefore suggests there's an increase in opposition. So that's what it tells you about wartime opposition. More common than ever implies opposition is increasing. Low life suggests an angry tone. Danger to other young people suggests the threat is serious. So these are sort of inferences you can be making about wartime opposition. So just a reminder that the source could be written or visual. Contextual information it will be useful for your answer to this question, and you must make an inference from both content and provenance in this question. Okay, so here's an example answer. Now just note I've done a couple of paragraphs. One, I'm going to be writing about the content of the source, and the other one I'm going to be writing about the provenance of the source. So example answer. This source tells us how wartime opposition was increasing within Nazi Germany from young people when it says that gatherings of young people have become more common than ever. It suggests that the war has been a key factor in increasing opposition when it says especially since the last bombing raid on Dusseldorf. We can also infer that Nazis view this kind of behaviour as a serious political threat to their regime, as the opposition is fairly low level, but the Nazis cite hanging around late in the evening as a danger to other young people. This is confirmed by our own knowledge, as opposition from young people did increase during World War II, such as opposition from the White Rose Group at Munich University. From the provenance of the source, I can infer that the purpose of the source is to gather information about the extent of the opposition, showing that the Nazis were concerned about opposition, suggesting it may be a threat to the Nazis. The tone of the source adds to this. The use of phrases such as this low life suggests that getting support from young people is essential to the Nazis, and the fact it is breaking down is a serious concern to them. This implies opposition in the war is becoming more of a problem. So just make sure for this answer you write both the content and the provenance of the source to make inferences about wartime opposition. Okay, so question 7 is worth 15 marks, and the question says, how useful are sources B and C and interpretation D for a historian studying Nazi camps in occupied Europe? In your answer, refer to the two sources and the interpretation as well as your own knowledge. So you can just pause it so you can have a look at the three bits of evidence you're being given, or two, you've got source B and source C here, so you can just pause that and have a look at that. And then here is interpretation D. Now, interpretation D is just the text on the back cover of the DVD, Escape from Sobibor. Made in 1987, the film is set in the Sobibor death camp in 1943, and it says, few stories of triumph have emerged from the Holocaust, but Escape from Sobibor is one such story, depicting the true events that led to the mass escape from one of the most notorious death camps of the Third Reich. On the 14th of October 1943, the inmates of Sobibor in eastern Poland put into action a terrifyingly ambitious plan to give every prisoner the chance to escape and survive. Those organising the escape knew that the plan was to include every prisoner, leaving no one behind to face revenge by the SS. This film recounts those events with accuracy. So in terms of answering question number 7, the question says, how useful are sources B and C and interpretation D for historians studying Nazi camps in occupied Europe? In your answer, refer to the two sources and the interpretation as well as your own knowledge. So one of the first things you've got to do for this question is identify what the inquiry is. In this case, it's a historian studying Nazi camps in occupied Europe, which I've highlighted in blue. So what you've got to do for this question is include one paragraph on each source or interpretation. There's absolutely no need to compare them. Explain how useful each source would be to the inquiry by writing about both content and provenance. When writing about content, explain what you can infer from each source and interpretation and why that would be useful. When writing about provenance, explain what would be useful, particularly about its purpose and what audience it's been made for. Remember, all sources and interpretations are useful, and you should very much focus on the ways in which the sources or interpretations are useful. Don't focus too much on limitations, so try to avoid phrases like, this source is biased, therefore it's not useful. Remember, all sources are useful. So there's a structure. You're going to have one paragraph on each, source B, source C, then interpretation D. There is no need to compare the sources and interpretations with each other. No need for an overall conclusion. Now, to get that good analysis in there, it's good to think about an extensometer and a how useful type approach to the question. So you might say something like, source B is highly useful for revealing resistance within the camps. The fact the prisoner drew these events and hid the sketches tells us that prisoners were trying to document the conditions and events in the camps, such as the mass murders shown here with prisoners being led off to the gas chambers. It's also extremely useful for showing us that Jews were taken to gas chambers at Auschwitz. We can see the Star of David on the prisoners' clothing and the crematorium in the background. It also depicts how they were murdered on arrival, as they are still wearing their own clothes and have hold of their suitcase. Overall, the source would be very useful for giving us an insight into resistance in Nazi camps. So link the idea of source utility to the inquiry question and historians studying Nazi camps in occupied Europe. Write about both content and provenance. Don't overly focus on limitations. So that would be a first paragraph. Then your source C answer. Source C is highly useful as evidence of showing the Nazis were making propaganda about the camps to cover up what they were really like. The commentary shows happy prisoners enjoying themselves in, quote, comfortable surroundings. A consideration of the purpose of the source suggests that there is evidence of growing international concern about the camps. We can work this out as the Nazis have clearly made the film to refute criticism and persuade people the Jews were being well treated. The film's commentary shows happy prisoners enjoying themselves. Therefore, despite the fact the source is not useful for showing us what the camps are really like, it's extremely useful for explaining what image of the camps the Nazis tried to present. So, for this source, some candidates may well have kind of talked about how, well, the source is biased and is not, doesn't link with our own knowledge and therefore is not very useful. But actually, you've got to think about the purpose and audience of the source and think about, well, actually, it's really useful for a historian studying Nazi camps because, you know, this source gives us almost like an insight into how the Nazis tried to present the image of what they wanted the outside world to think that the camps actually looked like, and therefore we can make an inference that probably they were facing international criticism about the camps in occupied Europe. Then finally, interpretation D is quite useful for a historian studying Nazi camps in occupied Europe. It tells us about the escape from Sobibor. This is useful as I know this is accurate, as in 1943 Jews rose up and killed 11 SS guards. D is useful for telling us about the brutality of punishments in the camp. The SS would seek revenge for the escape if any prisoner was left behind. The interpretation also provides evidence of Jewish resistance, which is an important story to tell about the camps. Interpretation D's purpose as a film may mean that the film exaggerates what happened to make it more exciting and more dramatic, and therefore is focused in on the rising, whereas not all camps had such active resistance. So in summary, for question 7, make sure that you have a paragraph on each source / interpretation. Don't focus too much on limitations. Make sure that you're focusing in on the idea of content and provenance and why this would be useful for a historian, in this case, studying Nazi camps in occupied Europe. Okay, so then you go on to question 8 or 9. You've got a choice of questions. We're going to look at these questions in this talk through. So the questions would be: the lives of women and girls became worse as a result of Nazi policies. How far do you agree with this view of Nazi Germany between 1933 and 1939? Make sure you pay attention to the date parameters of this question. Obviously, the first 3 topics on the Germany course are 1933 to 1939, and the final 2 topics are during the Second World War. So just be really super clear that you stay within the right time period. And then similarly, question 9, the most serious threat to the Nazis came from the churches. How far do you agree with this view of opposition to the Nazis in Germany between 33 and 39? And again, chronological understanding is important for this question. So obviously it's only opposition between 33 and 39, so therefore you couldn't write about the White Rose or the Stauffenberg plot, for example. So it's just really important to get your chronology correct. So for this question, you need to have 4 clear arguments. You need to write about degree of balance. So you need to write about both sides of the argument. You should reach a judgment in your conclusion. Use paragraphs to make clear the range of arguments, and make sure you stack your argument with evidence. Yeah, so for the 18 marker, like the other 18 markers, you're looking for a 4 key arguments. You need to have a degree of balance. It's a good idea to try and plan out your answer very quickly, and then you need to obviously have your conclusion. There is no need, of course, for an introduction for your essay. Yeah, so just in terms of getting that good analysis in here, we're not going to read through all of this, but you can pause this and just remind yourself about some great language to help you analyse the interpretation, how to emphasise your argument, how to downplay an argument, how to support your argument, how to embrace complexity within a historical question, how to develop your argument, and then some nice phrases to conclude your argument as well. Okay, so the first argument that agrees is there is plenty of evidence to support the statement that the lives of women and girls got worse as a result of Nazi policies. Firstly, because the Nazis wanted to encourage motherhood and homemaking, women's participation in higher education was severely limited. Female enrolment at universities was limited to 10% of all students, and this seems to have been successful because the numbers of women at German universities significantly fell in this period. So women's lives got worse because they were unable to pursue their chosen career paths. Okay, so a second argument to agree. Furthermore, as soon as the Nazis came to power, they forced many professional women to quit their jobs. Women were banned from civil service jobs in 1933, and within a year, over 350,000 women had been forced out of the workforce. In 1936, women were barred from working as lawyers and serving on juries, so the lives of many middle-class women got worse because they were unable to keep their well-paid and interesting jobs. Third argument disagrees. However, it could be argued that the lives improved for women who chose to stay at home and have families. The Nazis wanted to keep women at home, so incentives were offered to couples who married and had children through the marriage loan. For every child women had, the loan was reduced by a quarter. Many ordinary working class women actually preferred domestic life to hard and often boring factory work. In addition, propaganda made women feel that they were important to Nazi society, and some women influenced by this propaganda may have been happy with Nazi policies. There's evidence that many women joined the German Women's Enterprise run by Gertrude Schultz-Klink. It had 6 million members, suggesting its activities were popular with women. In addition, Mother's Day was made a national holiday, and the role of mothers in society was promoted via propaganda, so their lives improved because the lives of mothers and being at home was being valued and promoted within Nazi society. Okay, and then we're on to our fourth argument and disagree. Furthermore, in relation to girls and youth groups, the BDM was the main Nazi youth organisation for girls. Although this organisation indoctrinated girls with Nazi propaganda, there were aspects of membership which many enjoyed, particularly those from a working class background. For example, they were able to get out of the towns and cities and into the countryside and take part in activities such as hiking and camping. So their lives improved because they could gain access to activities they couldn't afford beforehand. So now you've got your four key arguments. You're then looking for your conclusion, your clinching argument. And here we go. Overall, I agree with the statement. The benefits for working class girls, such as camps and hikes, though enjoyable, were relatively short term. And although there were women who welcomed things like the marriage loan, the fact that choices about marriage and employment were removed, or at least restricted, meant that most women's lives did not improve. For some, mainly in the middle classes, life got much worse in the long term as their education and careers suffered. Okay, so we'll look at the final question. Same deal. The most serious threat to the Nazis came from the churches. How far do you agree with this view of opposition? So looking for four clear arguments, your degree of balance, and you're looking for a clinching argument. So you're looking at this kind of structure, and again, you want to think about what your four key arguments are going to be, making sure you've got a degree of balance, so at least one of your arguments agrees and at least one of your arguments disagrees. Okay, so here's your first degree. There is lots to support for this statement because there was lots of opposition from the churches. For example, Martin Niemöller was a Protestant pastor who criticised the Nazis and preached against their racial policies. He refused to join the Reich Church and started up the non-Nazi confessional church, the German confessional church. By 1934, 6,000 pastors had joined as compared to just 2,000 in the Reich Church. This was a serious threat to the Nazis because it undermined their ability to spread their ideology, and as a Christian country, many German people were loyal to the churches. Second degree, nevertheless, there was some opposition to church, which they felt they could not silence. In 1934, the Catholic Cardinal Galen began to give sermons which mocked and criticised the Nazis. He also helped to write and promote a letter from the Pope called With Burning Concern or Burning Anxiety in 1937, which criticised Nazi policies. The Gestapo were sent to question Galen, but he was too high profile to persecute, so he continued to resist, showing that he was a serious threat. Pope Pius XI issued this encyclical called With Burning Anxiety, which was against the Nazi regime. It was a sermon that was made to be read out on Palm Sunday, which is the most popular Sunday of the year to attend church. Therefore, the church could be used as a way of openly criticising the Nazis, which was very difficult to do in German society. This is strong evidence to suggest the church was a serious threat. Okay, the first disagree. However, the Nazis were able to effectively control the opposition from the churches, which gives weight to the view that the most serious threat did not come from the churches. For example, they arrested Paul Schneider, who preached against Nazi policy in 1933 and then again in 1935. In 1937, he banned parishioners who were Nazi Party members from attending his services. However, he was imprisoned at Buchenwald and then murdered by lethal injection in 1939. This shows the churches weren't a serious threat because the Nazis' terror state was able to silence their opposition. Okay, so here we have our second disagree, which actually focuses on other opposition groups to challenge the argument that the most serious threat to the Nazis came from the churches. And to be honest with you, you could probably write a couple of paragraphs sort of looking at the other types of opposition that existed during this time. But here we go, here's this one. Despite this, there were other groups that posed a serious threat to the Nazis. For example, the swing youth movement resented Nazi control and defied the Nazis by organising illegal dances and listening to American jazz and swing. They deliberately dressed in English clothes because they knew it annoyed the Nazi authorities. The Nazi regime certainly saw this kind of behaviour as a serious threat because Himmler personally asked the Gestapo to deal with them, and many were arrested. In addition, left-wing opposition from the Communists and the Social Democrats was another serious threat. It could be argued this was the most serious threat as George Elser, a communist, attempted to assassinate Hitler in November 1939, and the attempt only failed as Hitler left the meeting 13 minutes earlier. The church never came so close to such direct opposition, suggesting the most serious threat perhaps came from the left wing rather than the churches. Okay, and here's your final analysis. In final analysis, I would say the churches did pose the most serious threat to the Nazis because they were the biggest competitor for people's hearts and minds, which could not be fully silenced, notwithstanding the removal of Schneider. Though groups like the swing kids were more than a nuisance to the Nazis, these constituted a tiny minority of young people as opposed to the membership and allegiance to various churches, which were the largest non-Nazi organisations in Germany. So there you have it. There's a walkthrough of the Germany exam. Hope that you found that useful. Bye-bye.